anyone who doesn't know, once again, we are no drama, just movies. We do. Let's start again, actually. Hello, everyone. Welcome to No Drama, Just Movies. We are back this week with another review. This time we are reviewing none other than the classic Marc Webb's The Amazing Spider-Man 2. So for anyone who doesn't know, we have currently been reviewing all of the live-action Spider-Man movies, starting with Sam Raimi's trilogy, which we will have a link down below so you can check those out, which we had a lot of fun with. And now we have started with the Marc Webb Spider-Man movies. We reviewed first The Amazing Spider-Man. Now we are reviewing The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Just to let you know, we do weekly reviews every single week, whether it be current movie releases or cult classics. But let's not waste any time. The Amazing Spider-Man 2. This, for a lot of people, for a long time, has been a movie that was very much so frowned upon, was very much so looked down on. And it's a movie that you can't talk about The Amazing Spider-Man 2 without talking about Sony, as the title of this video suggests. And you can't talk about The Amazing Spider-Man 2 without talking about the landscape of the comic book movie genre at the time in 2014. However, we will get to that because that is very important to this video. So first and foremost, just your quick thoughts. What were your quick out of the cinema thoughts? We are currently recording this on a Tuesday night. We saw this yesterday on Monday night. What's your thoughts? Have it changed? Have your thoughts changed from 10 years ago?
Yes. I think the last review we did of The Amazing Spider-Man, when we talked about what's next and watching this film again, we were both a little bit wary of it, I think. And I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. It's not great, and most of that is towards the end. But like really the beginning just I actually maybe even liked it more than the first one.
Yeah, and what's crazy is that I'm going to agree with you. I did enjoy this more now than I did 10 years ago. And I think one thing as well is that, and once again, I'm going to get onto this in a second, but in terms of the context of the times, but let me just say right now, I did enjoy this more than how I remember it. I do think it is more enjoyable of a movie than The Amazing Spider-Man 1. Does it have problems that are literally staring at you in the face? 100%. But this movie is anchored by a relationship and a arc that is so good and that is so emotionally beautiful that it just makes it far more enjoyable to watch. Not to mention, it is actually fun. Like a lot of those, we will get into it, but a lot of the first person shots of Spidey and the shots of Spidey being Spidey are genuinely fun. And once again, a huge shout out to Andrew Garfield. However, so that would be my quick thoughts. Similarly to you, I enjoyed it. I think it is a better movie than Spider-Man, The Amazing Spider-Man 1. Is it a great movie? No. Is it even a good movie? I would say no. However, it is fun. But then now I think it's just ideal to just hop into why for the longest time we both maybe didn't like the movie and why for the longest time that it was frowned upon or heavily frowned upon. So we've had this discussion, you know, we have been there since the beginning, obviously at different stages in our lives. But when I say since the beginning, at least should we say of the Marvel boom, right? I'm not talking about obviously the Foxx X-Men movies, what came before. I'm talking about the Marvel boom specifically. So if we go to 2012, you know, Avengers comes out and it is the greatest thing ever, right? To comic book movie fans, and not just comic book movie fans, to the general population of moviegoers. It takes us into an era of comic book movie making that we've never seen before, completely changes the landscape in every single way because it shows you that not only is it possible for you to create a shared cinematic universe, but it's possible for you to create multiple properties and multiple characters that, in the eyes of the audiences, they love. 2 years on from that now, we're at The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And at this point in the timeline, I would say that Marvel have not only hit their boom period, they're in their GOAT level status, in my opinion. At this point, we're at, I believe, towards the end of phase 2. Age of Ultron had either been released already or is soon to be released. Like the Marvel fandom is there. The MCU is booming. It has a firm grasp on not just the comic book movie space, but the movie space in general. And obviously, as we know, that very much so influenced not only just Sony, but multiple studios, even studios who don't have comic book movie properties, obviously, to now try to set up the cinematic universe. Clearly, Sony was affected by that. Clearly, Sony wanted to replicate their own. And once again, RV Arad, veteran Sony producer, must have, him and Amy Pascal, good old Amy, probably had a lot to do with this. However, it clearly was not the right way to go, and it was in many ways their undoing. We'll talk later on about the after effects of what this movie ultimately did to Sony and for Sony in relation to that Spider-Man property. But just one question I wanted to ask you, right? Back in 2014, obviously, when this movie comes out, with the approach that Sony took, whether the execution was good or not, would you say that it was a good idea for Sony to approach also having a shared cinematic universe? Would that be something that you think would be something that's fair for them to attempt? Because I personally think that it is something that you would attempt. And I don't really blame them for it. But was it the execution, or do you think that they shouldn't have done it in general?
I think it was the execution. I think it was the trying to shoehorn too much into it right at the end. Because like I said, I really enjoyed most of the film, actually, like until Electro was gone. Spoilers. But then suddenly we've got Goblin, we've got Rhino, we've got then what's his name? The hat guy, the guy with the hat. But we've got him like meeting Harry and setting up the Sinister Six. And it's just so much in the last like 10, 20 minutes that it feels like a setup for the next one or even the next couple. And I think Marvel did something amazing with that universe thing, because they gave themselves time to set things up, to like introduce a character here, maybe a little bit, and then we get another introduction and another introduction in their solo films, and then we come together to do the Avengers. They didn't just have Iron Man, for example, and then at the end Hulk shows up and Thor shows up and suddenly they're all together and like we get like an Avengers film in the last 10 minutes of Iron Man. I think it was the execution.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's the thing, because, we've had this discussion before, some people, even to this very day, how, we've got Kraven the Hunter and Venom the Last Dance both coming out this year, right? And so, 10 years on, Sony still is doing a variation of a shared cinematic universe, right? Even though it doesn't feel very shared at the moment, but they're still doing their having their go, or at least expanding the Spider-Man universe and taking the property and turning different characters into their own solo movies and solo ventures. And I don't think that that's a wrong play. I think that if you are a studio who obviously your goal is to ideally, first and foremost, make good movies, and then secondly, obviously, make money, or the order might be the other way around. Like, if you have the Spider-Man property, right, which is arguably, I'm pretty sure, like their most profitable property, especially with how much No Way Home made at the box office. Like, it would be silly not to tap into that universe and see what you could do. And so I definitely think that it was the right decision for them to tap into that. I agree with you, however, that it's in the execution. Yeah. And it does make you wonder, like, why rush? Like, why did studios, well, I guess we kind of know why studios want to make money, but why feel the need to rush to get to the same point as where Marvel is? But once again, I think I'm answering that question. It's clearly money, because we didn't see that just with Sony. We saw it with DC and how quickly they tried to fire up their cinematic universe with the DC EU. But it's a shame. Like it does make you wonder why rush, because you even look at this movie and the idea of a Sinister Six is quite fascinating, right?
Yes.
Told in the right way.
Yeah, Sinister Six. That would have been like a fourth film or something,
Mm.
right? Because you like maybe for the third film you set up Rhino, and maybe have like a little Doc Ock or something in the background. Basically, like the first one did, right? The first one, the first Amazing Spider-Man mentioned Osborn, Norman Osborn somewhere in the background, right? He's around, but we don't see him. Something like that, right? Just take your time and like
Yeah.
introduce them bit by bit. But there was, like you said, there was a rush, I think, from many people at that time to catch up with Marvel because they saw, oh, Marvel is working. They're making all the money.
Mm.
And their takeaway from that, and I think that's still kind of Sony's takeaway, and that's where it kind of like dipped in quality. The takeaway was we just need to, do a universe, right? They didn't consider let's tell a great story
Yeah.
with great characters and then bring those characters together. It was like, how do we quickly make more money, right? This
Mm.
works. Oh, let's grab that. And it just falls apart because there's no real intent or real thought behind it other than let's make some money.
That's the thing. And it's crazy as well, like the fact that we're 10 years on and no one's actually been able to replicate the Marvel model
Hmm.
really that successfully. Like you mentioned, for example, like I'm currently doing a rewatch of some of the MCU movies, and I was watching Age of Ultron the other day, which obviously came out in the same year as Amazing Spider-Man 2. And you mentioned something there about obviously prioritizing story and characters. That is what made the MCU special. Like the shared universe aspect was an amazing cherry on top that felt like you were getting the cake and then some. Do you know what I mean? It felt like you were really just being treated, but you were so invested in the characters, the development of the characters, the amazing scripts and lines that were coming out of those movies. Like just the amount of care and attention that was being paid to it. And here we are 10 years on, and it still hasn't been replicated. And, you go back now 10 years to when this movie came out, obviously, their efforts were unsuccessful, that being Sony. And it's a shame because there are things in this movie that do really work and that
Hmm.
are really great. The first being that whole arc and relationship between Peter and Gwen is beautiful. Like it is the emotional core, it's the heartbeat of the movie, and it's beautiful. And you have two top tier talents in Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield, right? Both at their best, just doing an amazing performance and really conveying this idea. You really understood this idea that these are two people who are meant to be for each other, but also not meant to be for each other. You're looking at it through Peter's lens, where he is still feeling the burden of what Captain Stacy told him and feeling like this is only going to get her in trouble. She is then getting annoyed at the fact that she wants to go all in on this, but she can't. Then by the time she brings in the swerve, of her saying, listen, I'm going to be going to Oxford, you really do feel that sense of pain in Peter that I can't lose her. And this is a tug and pull game. And I really love that. I thought that it was beautiful. And I don't think, even to this day, you don't always want to do a comparison game, but I'm going to do a comparison game. I've never seen, I think, a relationship done so beautifully in a Spider-Man movie, personally speaking. I
Even
just
the new one?
really, yeah. Even in comparison to the new ones, it just really had me. I've never seen a Peter and love interest story on live action that's just had me in such a emotional grip like this one did. It was just really beautiful, personally speaking.
I do agree. Like the two leads, I guess, like Andrew Garfield, Emma Stone, they were just fantastic. That like the chemistry was off the charts, and there were so many moments when they were together, not even as Spider-Man and Gwen, but just as Peter and Gwen, where I thought I would watch a rom-com with them. I would just
Mm,
watch this, just them being together or trying to be together. It doesn't have to be a Spider-Man in there. Like, it doesn't have to be a comic book film. And I think that's a great sign that you just want to
Yeah.
watch these two people being together. I think I said for the last one how I hated the characterization of Peter Parker, and that they didn't give him the misery that he deserves.
Misery.
But I think why I like this one a little bit more is because they caught up. They realized this is what a Spider-Man story needs, right? We need that choice, that misery. And we had it, just like you said the last time. Oh, he's going to pay in the next film. And he did. Like big
Mm.
time as well. Like, spoilers, she dies. So it's a much better, I think, much more interesting take on Peter Parker and Spider-Man.
I agree. And that, speaking, of Gwen dying, obviously that classic scene, obviously taken from the Death of Gwen Stacy comic run, but that death still hits as hard now as it
Oh
did
yes.
10 years ago. Like it's even like the way it's shot with her neck literally snapping and hitting the ground as he's trying to save her. And the web is obviously almost like in the form of a hand. Is
Yes, I love
yeah,
that
which
shot. That's a really
yeah,
cool
really
shot.
nice touch. Even jumping onto that in terms of what works, like we mentioned, obviously that the movie's fun. Like I enjoy the fight scenes. I think visually they look really cool.
Mm.
Like Spider-Man is doing his usual quippy stuff. The opening of the movie is really fun. With the chase of not soon to be Rhino through
Yes.
New York. While Gwen is giving her speech, and that speech is then replayed at the end, which I think is a really beautiful speech as well. That goes into that emotional story between Peter and Gwen. Also, as well, I would say one of the good things about the movie is that with Electro, I think even though it's very campy, I'm not a fan of how they presented Max at the beginning. It does give off very much so to me Jim Carrey Riddler vibes in terms of it's a bit campy, it's a bit unrealistic, it's a bit too cheesy in terms of your Max with his strands of hair and the way that Jamie Foxx portrays that character. I think that a much better portrayal in No Way Home, I'll put it that way. However, at the same time, I still did appreciate the fact that Max's Max was still sympathetic. His desire
Mm.
for wanting to be seen. You really did see that this is someone suffering with trauma. That's the guy who was bullied at school, who never got invited to the parties at school. Who never people never really asked him questions. He's that guy. However, he was a guy that was super intelligent. But you see that person carrying on that trauma. So when Spidey does give him that nod and does make him feel a bit special, you really do feel that. However, it's just a case of by the time he becomes Electro, I don't really feel like it really made me feel that okay, I can understand why this character would now want to kill Spider-Man. Like, don't get wrong, I get the whole
Yes.
thing of he feels like Spider-Man now is taking the spotlight off of him, and that didn't really actually care about him, and now that he has powers, he's gonna say, what, F you to everybody, which I guess is a good enough reason, but not a good enough reason for wanting to kill Spider-Man, or at least that wasn't executed as well for me.
I think yes. It might make sense, I think, for him to get there eventually. Because if it builds, but I think they rushed that very much to get him from, oh, I love Spider-Man because he actually like remembers my name or something, or he needs me. This thing where he just wants people to need him. To Spider-Man doesn't remember my name, and then Spider-Man has more gets more attention than me. Uh, to I want to kill Spider-Man. I think it needed like a little step in between that, but it might have worked eventually if, for example, we had that in the third act, so basically towards the end.
Mm.
Um, Electro. That's what thinking like just cut out the Rhino and Harry and just deal with Electro and just build that a little bit more, and then have him as the big bad at the end.
I agree. I think Harry should have been maybe a Spider-Man 3 villain, the
Yeah.
Amazing Spider-Man 3
Oh,
villain.
definitely.
I mean, on the topic of Harry, how did you find Harry and his dead daddy?
I really like Dane DeHaan. I really like Dane DeHaan as Harry. I think I preferred him to James Franco, um, because he had that sort of you could believe that he went to private school. He got like educated to be the next leader, basically, and you could see that sort of arrogance in him, especially when he has that board meeting when he tells everyone, "Oh, you can keep your jobs," basically. Not sure about the whole like Goblin part of it because I
Yeah.
maybe that was a little bit over the top as well. But that I don't know. Maybe that's just the film it was because we also get a Russian dude in a big Rhino costume, Rhino suit, and so yeah, maybe it's just the tone and we're not fans of it, but it's definitely consistent.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the thing as well. Like, and I mentioned this to you yesterday. Like, when you look at Harry, I was more understanding of Harry's reason for wanting to kill Spider-Man than Electro. Because with Harry, even though I felt like Norman Osborn dying off so soon was maybe not the right move, but I was willing to accept it. The idea that Harry is dying, he's suffering from the same disease that his father dies from. The idea that he has this disease and that for him he is grasping at straws,
Mm.
trying to find a solution and a cure to keep him alive. And so the idea that he feels like the closest possible solution would be to access Spider-Man's blood, which, that whole arc, yeah, but
I
we
didn't
don't even need to, we don't even, yeah, not a good one. But the idea of him wanting that and Spidey saying no, I think I understood that. And especially for him to realize later on that it wasn't Spidey saying no, it's Peter saying no.
like.
Even though the way that he finds out Spider-Man is Peter is a bit pretty quick. I think it
I
feels
think he
like
like it's
he put two and two
isn't it? He
together kind of
looks at Gwen and
Gwen.
goes, "Oh, you care about Gwen? You must be Peter then."
Yeah.
I
And
I
I
think it's
didn't,
something like that.
yeah, I didn't fully buy that because I think in real life you wouldn't jump to that conclusion immediately.
Mm,
But it's a comic
yeah.
book movie, you let it ride. Um,
Let's quickly talk about the whole spy things with his dad and like the revelations that we get there. Um, what did you think about the reveal of Richard Parker putting his blood or using his blood in the spiders, and that's why Peter has spider powers?
it was ridiculous. I felt like it was an idea that maybe executed another way could have been quite compelling. However, this one wasn't. Like it just wasn't. Like the idea that in order to stop Norman Osborn from using his research for bad, he put his DNA into the spider so that way if they try to extract the venom from the spider to use on other people, it wouldn't work, and it would only work on Peter, thus transforming him into Spider-Man. Like, it just didn't really mesh, or it doesn't really make too much sense. But it was something I was intrigued of in the first movie because, like, it
Yeah.
kind of makes you go, "Ooh, where could this be going?" But it didn't work.
Yeah, I could have done without that part.
Mm.
I still didn't enjoy the spy stuff. I think it like became a completely different film. And I would rather they would have spent more time on maybe Max, maybe the relationship between Peter and other people. Um, but it's also like it kind of ruins Spider-Man, maybe even in the sense that it's now kind of Peter's birthright to become Spider-Man. It's not really something that just happens to a kid by accident, which I think that's a much better message. Uh, we had, for example, in the Raimi films, here's a kid that gets superpowers, and what does he do with them? Is he going to use them, or is he not going to use them? Whereas here, it's like you were always meant to use them. You don't really have a choice because your dad at some point decided that you're at one point going to get superpowers.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. I agree. And I mean, to wrap up, obviously, this, as the title suggests, was the beginning of the end for Sony in terms of the Spider-Man property because this created a real turn of events back in 2014, because obviously it led to Amy Pascal going to Kevin Feige and saying, show us how to do this. And then luckily, as the fans, we then ended up with a great choice, because then we got not only Spider-Man making his debut in the MCU, but then we had the idea of Kevin Feige helping Sony to develop Spider-Man. And so essentially, even though this was a dark day for Sony and a dark time for Sony, luckily as the fans for Spider-Man, we came out of it on the good end. However, I still think there's an argument, obviously, to be made that the rest of Sony's Spider-Man properties have still, suffered a similar fate. But I think that's a conversation for another time.
I think that's part of the end as well. It's that they gave away Spider-Man, and now they're trying to use Spider-Man characters like Morbius and Craven coming out soon, and Madame Webb, without Spider-Man, which it doesn't make sense. So it's in that sense, I think it was kind of the end, because they give away the reason why they're doing this.
Good point. So The Amazing Spider-Man 2, how many ICs are we giving this out of 10? This is our new review scoring system where we give it an IC out of 10, or a certain amount of ICs out of 10. So let's go to you first. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, how many ICs out of 10?
Okay. Because I enjoyed it a lot more, except for the ending, I might give it a 7. I think I'm going to give it 7 nice ICs, like a mixed flavor that lingers a little bit nicer on the tongue.
I like that. I like that a lot. Well, so you're going with 7 ICs out of 10.
7 ICs out of 10, yeah.
Well, I'm going to come close to you. I'm going to go with 6.5 ICs out of 10. Simply because I think it is a fun movie. I think that if you're a Spider-Man fan, you can still get enjoyment out of this movie. However, it can't help but being bogged down by, the disastrous approach that Sony took in terms of building the cinematic universe. However, those were darker days, but luckily better days ahead, because we will next be going on to review the Homecoming trilogy, started with Spider-Man Homecoming. So that will be our next review of Spider-Man. Once again, guys, we are No Drama, Just Movies. Thank you so much for checking out our video. If you like our content, please like, comment, subscribe, get in the conversation, because we're just 2 movie-loving friends who love to talk about movies, and we love to talk about movies with other people as well. So that has been our review of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. My name is Cameron Kelly Smith, and I am joined by my esteemed colleague.
Oh,
that's it. Come on, we are the dynamic duo. We will next be moving on to a better version of Spider-Man. So thank you very much for checking out our review of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Thank you so much for checking us out, guys, and we will see you very, very soon. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.